You probably won't believe me, but I need to tell someone before it happens again. It's been months, and I can still feel the cold dampness on my skin, hear the faint echoes, but it's the silence that truly terrifies me now. My name is Elias Thorne, and I used to live for the thrill of the forgotten. Dark corners, abandoned buildings, the kind of places history left behind. That was my addiction, but nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the labyrinth beneath Paris. Before we begin, it's tradition here. Comment the exact time you're watching this. Midnight Squad, where are you? The Catacombs, not the tourist sections, of course. Those sanitized tunnels, brightened by artificial light, are just a macabre theme park. No, I sought the real catacombs. The restricted passages. The sprawling ossuary that still whispers with the weight of 6 million souls. My gear was always top-notch. An ultra-sensitive directional microphone, a military-grade headlamp, a reliable GPS, and a quiet confidence that bordered on recklessness. I'd spent years honing my skills, learning the unmarked entrances, mapping the forgotten routes. It was a pilgrimage, a deep dive into the Earth's memory, and the danger was half the draw. This particular night, weeks before things truly unraveled, the air felt different, heavier. I'd slipped past the usual entry points, descended through a narrow, unmarked fissure, and was now deep within one of the most perilous sections, a stretch of crumbling tunnels known for sudden cave-ins and unmapped shafts. The air hung thick with the scent of damp earth, calcified bone, and something else. Something faintly metallic, like old coins or dried blood. My headlamp cut a stark beam through the absolute darkness, revealing walls constructed entirely of femurs and skulls, stacked meticulously, endlessly. It was a breathtaking, terrifying monument to mortality. I was recording ambient sound, as I always did, the drip of water echoing in the vastness, the scuttling of unseen things, the heavy silence that pressed in on you until your own heartbeat seemed deafening. Then I heard it. First, I dismissed it as a trick of my mind, or perhaps the wind whistling through a distant vent, though that was unlikely so far down. But it grew, faint and ethereal, like a whisper carried on an ancient draft. Choral music. It wasn't loud, not like a choir in a hall. It was as if the sound itself was buried under layers of earth and time, struggling to break free. Low, resonant voices, weaving intricate harmonies, almost hymnal in their slow, mournful cadence. I froze, my own breath catching in my throat. Every fiber of my being screamed impossible. No other explorer would be this deep, certainly not performing a Gregorian chant. This was miles from any known entry, down treacherous, unstable paths. I held my breath, lifting my directional mic, tilting it slowly, trying to pinpoint the source. The sounds seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere, seeping into the very stone around me. My skin prickled with goosebumps despite the relative warmth of my exertion. It was beautiful, yes, but profoundly unsettling. The harmony was too perfect, too sorrowful, too ancient. It felt like listening to the earth breathe a lament. I pressed record, trying to capture every nuance, every ghostly tremor of sound. I stayed there for what felt like an eternity, bathed in the unearthly chorus, until it slowly, almost imperceptibly, faded back into the oppressive silence, leaving me with nothing but the echo of my own ragged breathing and a recording that felt too precious, too terrifying, to properly comprehend. Returning to the surface was a relief, a release from the crushing weight of that subterranean world. The cool night air of Paris had never felt so crisp, the distant city hum never so comforting. I walked home, adrenaline slowly draining, a strange mix of exhilaration and unease swirling within me. I immediately uploaded my recordings, eager to analyze what I'd captured. The ambient sounds were crisp, the drips and scuttles clear, but the choral music, though present, was barely audible, lost in the background hiss. I was disappointed, convinced I hadn't properly isolated it. I spent the next few days in my apartment, trying to enhance the audio. I boosted the levels, filtered out background noise, but the faint, mournful voices remained elusive. I mentioned my frustration to Leo, a friend from my university days, a sound engineer who'd always been fascinated by my exploits. "Try reversing it, Elias," he'd suggested, almost as an afterthought, leaning back in his chair during a video call. "Sometimes sound artifacts reveal themselves in strange ways. Or maybe it's just a funny echo." He chuckled, oblivious to the chill that had already begun to settle in my bones. I scoffed at the idea, but later that night, driven by a perverse curiosity, I loaded the track into my audio software and hit the reverse button. The initial sound was a distorted mess, a garbled rush of static and echoes. I was about to close the program, convinced it was a waste of time, when something shifted. The static resolved, coalescing into distinct syllables, slowly, horrifyingly, forming words. A voice, deep and resonant, began to chant. My blood ran cold. It wasn't the ethereal chorus anymore. This was a single voice, clear and strong, reciting a series of phrases I didn't understand, yet they resonated with an almost primal familiarity. I leaned closer to the speakers, a sickening dread twisting in my gut. The words were archaic, guttural, a language I couldn't place, yet I felt a horrific certainty. It was my voice, unmistakably mine, chanting prayers I had never heard, never spoken, never even conceived of. My own intonations, my own subtle vocal quirks, perfectly preserved, reciting an ancient litany of dread. The air in my apartment grew heavy, suffocating. I slammed my laptop shut, the metallic click echoing like a gunshot in the sudden, absolute silence. My hands trembled, clammy with sweat. How could this be? Had I been possessed, even for a moment, down there? Had I unwittingly become a conduit? I spent the next few days in a fog of disbelief and mounting terror. I tried to rationalize it. A bizarre audio anomaly? A misidentification? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion and the unsettling atmosphere of the catacombs? I played the recording again, backwards and forwards, scrutinizing every waveform, every frequency. The reverse chant was undeniable. It was me, and the words, though still alien, began to burrow into my mind, a chilling whisper at the edge of my consciousness. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, a gateway to whatever horror awaited me. Hey, side note before we continue. Should I add creepy sound effects in the background, or keep it clean and simple? Comment your vote. Then it started. The first time I woke abruptly, disoriented, the clammy chill of unfamiliar stone seeping into my bones. My eyes fluttered open to a sky choked with tangled branches, silhouetted against a bruised, pre-dawn light. The air smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves, but also of something else, something sweet and cloying like old roses and sorrow. My fingers were caked with gritty soil, dark crescents beneath my fingernails. I was lying face down, half buried in a patch of overturned soil, just beyond a crumbling, moss-covered tombstone. Père Lachaise, one of the oldest, most famous cemeteries in Paris. Panic seized me, sharp and cold. How did I get here? I'd fallen asleep on my sofa, laptop still on the floor, the reversed chant echoing in my mind. I was miles from my apartment. My phone was dead in my pocket. My clothes were damp and covered in dirt. As I scrambled to my feet, brushing frantically at my jeans, I realized something else. A low hum vibrated in my throat, an involuntary, rhythmic sound. It was the chant, the ancient, guttural prayer I'd heard on the reversed recording. It was on my lips, ready to be sung, a phantom melody that burned in my throat. I stumbled home, a ghost in my own city, the chant a silent scream trapped behind my clenched teeth. I locked the door, drew the blinds, and tried to scrub the dirt from my hands, but the black soil seemed embedded under my nails, a permanent stain. I told myself it was sleepwalking, a severe anxiety attack manifesting as a bizarre fugue state. I forced myself to stay awake for 2 days, fueled by coffee and sheer terror. The second time I was in Montmartre Cemetery, Again, the pre-dawn gloom, the chill, the overwhelming scent of decay and damp earth. This time, I was kneeling at the base of a forgotten monument, my hands cupped around a handful of cold, dark soil. The dirt was under my nails, deeper than before. And the chant. It was louder this time, not just in my throat, but echoing in my ears, a booming chorus that seemed to rise from the very ground around me. I could feel the individual words now, their alien rhythm pulsing through my veins. It became a macabre ritual. Every few nights, despite my desperate attempts to fight sleep, I would succumb, only to wake up in another corner of Paris's necropolises. Montparnasse, Passy, even smaller, obscure churchyards I didn't even know existed. I would be covered in dirt, my body aching, my mind a jumbled mess of fear and confusion, and the ancient chant always, always in my throat, an unwelcome, unshakable companion. My apartment became a fortress of paranoia. I nailed blankets over my windows, blocked my door, and tried to stay awake until my eyelids burned and my vision blurred. I researched the catacombs, ancient Parisian rituals, anything that might explain the burgeoning horror. I found nothing concrete, only whispers of old rites and forgotten gods, vague references to spirits who craved a voice. There was a week where I thought I'd beaten it. I'd managed to stay awake for nearly 4 days straight, the exhaustion so profound it felt like I was floating outside my own body. The phantom chant had receded, replaced by the persistent ringing in my ears. I felt a fragile sense of victory, a desperate hope that I had, through sheer will, broken the cycle. I finally, cautiously, allowed myself to drift off, collapsing into bed, convinced the nightmare was over. I awoke not to the sight of grave markers, but to the crushing darkness of solid earth above me. The air was thick, heavy with the familiar scent of mildewed stone and calcified bone. My hands were pressed against a rough, damp wall. The chant was not just in my throat now, it was everywhere, a thundering chorus that pulsed through the very fabric of my being. And I wasn't just singing along, I was harmonizing. I was one voice in a subterranean choir, deep within the winding, restricted passages of the Paris catacombs. I could feel the dirt, not just under my nails, but caked into my teeth, clinging to my eyelids. I don't know how long I was down there, or what I did, but when I finally stumbled out just before dawn, finding myself in a secluded, overgrown section I'd never seen before, I realized something chilling. The chant was no longer a haunting echo. It was a part of me, a living, breathing thing that resonated in my chest, a sacred tune just waiting to be sung. I still wake in graveyards, sometimes further afield now, sometimes in places I don't recognize at all. The dirt is a constant presence under my nails. I catch glimpses of my reflection and see a stranger, gaunt and haunted, with eyes that hold an ancient, knowing light. I'm sharing this now because I can feel it intensifying. The choir is calling to me, constantly. I think they need a permanent member, and I'm afraid, terrifyingly afraid, that I've finally learned all the words. You made it to the end. You're braver than most. Hit subscribe and share in the comments what type of story you want to hear next.